When the ancient Romans first coined the phrase that from Africa there was always something new, they little realized by how far they had understated the fact. For Africa has always been the dark continent, land of mystery, and home of spectacular wildlife. But today it is also a land of technological achievement, and although some 2,000 years have passed since Roman times, once again from this Africa, something new, as man's most sophisticated electronic achievement of the 20th century, and nature's primeval king of the reptiles, meet for a brief moment in the unusual story of the computer and the crocodile. "150 miles north of Durban as the gull flies lies St Lucia Bay, a marvel of nature, and until recently rated one of the 10 best fishing areas in the world. But the advent of civilization has all but destroyed this unique example of the delicately balanced forces of nature. For here at St Lucia existed a biological environment in which freshwater flora and fauna coexisted with their saltwater counterparts. St Lucia Lake, 25 miles north of the river mouth, is connected with the sea by the St Lucia Estuary, a series of shallows and sandbanks, which, at Brodie's Crossing, afforded a means, in days gone by, of broaching the river, an operation not without hazard. In the past, during the months of winter, the tidal inflow of salt-laden seawater up the estuary brought the salinity content of the lake to a stage where prawns and flamingos flourished. And then, in spring, rains would bring the Makuzi River down in flood to flush out the saline water and restore the equilibrium. And then man tampered with this delicate balance. He dammed the Makuzi, so that by 1970, the salinity in the lake had risen to nearly 3 times that of the sea. The wildlife disappeared, and even the crocodiles were so salt-riddled that their bodies festered, and the Air Force had to be called in to rescue them. Publicity of the problem produced a host of drastic solutions, amongst which was a proposal to blast through the 300-foot-high ridge of sand between the lake and the sea, without any knowledge of what the after effects would be. For this was the case back in 1952, when the Umfolozi River was given a separate mouth in an attempt to prevent silting of the estuary proper. But today the problem is anything but solved. In a gallant attempt to keep the estuary open, dredging operations are continued day after day, and thousands of tons of dredged sand are dumped in the flats alongside the river. But the operation is no sooner finished than it starts all over again. In 1964, the St Lucia Lake Commission tabled its comprehensive report, in which it defined the problems on a broad basis. And in 1969, a Johannesburg civil engineering computing company was commissioned to compile a mathematical model of the St Lucia Lake. A great deal of data was made available. The currents in the estuary had been measured. The levels in the lake had been tabulated over the years. The force and direction of the winds was known. And all this information was punched onto cards and fed into the vast memory of the computer at Wits University. Data on the tidal fluctuations at the mouth of the estuary, and details of the action of the waves. statistical history of the catchment runoffs, the rainfall on and the evaporation from the lake surface, the fluctuations in the salinity content, and every conceivable item that could prove a contributing factor. And then the maze of mathematical programs that form the heart of the model, sets of algebraic equations that, based on the cross-referenced data already stored in the computer's memory, will enable engineers to predict the outcome of any proposed set of conditions without the time and expense of having to put the scheme into practice. And then, when satisfactory solutions have been found to the many problems, perhaps the lake area will return to its former glory, and the wildlife flourish as nature intended it should. Perhaps the birds will return to nest in the marshes that once were their homes. And then, perhaps, the St Lucia crocodiles, whom man has brought so close to extinction, will finally benefit from their brief encounter with the electronic marvel, which South African engineers believe will provide the solution to the future of St Lucia Bay.